In the aftermath of the Second World War, when the guns had finally fallen silent and Europe lay shattered, British military historian Basil Henry Liddell Hart began a series of interviews that would quietly challenge one of the most comfortable assumptions of Allied victory. In 1946, as captured German generals sat in prison camps and interrogation rooms, Hart posed what seemed like a straightforward professional question. What, in your judgment, would have defeated Germany faster? He expected the answers to revolve around overwhelming Allied industry, strategic bombing, air superiority, or the sheer mathematical imbalance of resources. He assumed the defeated commanders would cite logistics, fuel shortages, or the impossibility of resisting an enemy that outproduced them 10-1. What he received instead was something far more unsettling. The German generals did not describe a superior Allied plan. They described a mistake. Not a tactical error on a battlefield, not a failed operation, but a strategic decision at the highest level. One that, in their view, granted Germany something it no longer deserved in the autumn of 1944: time. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the senior German commander in Western Europe, did not speak defensively or bitterly. He spoke analytically, like a professional explaining a solved problem. According to him, the Allies had handed Germany a reprieve at the very moment when the war in the West should have ended. That reprieve, he argued, cost tens of thousands of Allied lives and extended the conflict by roughly half a year. As Hart listened, he realized this was not a criticism of geography or battlefield maneuvering. It was an accusation of missed finality. If Rundstedt was correct, then the silence of May 1945 could have begun in November 1944. Every grave dug between those dates was no longer an inevitability of war. It was the consequence of a choice. The collapse that should have ended it. By late August 1944, the German military situation in France was not merely deteriorating, it was unraveling. The Allied breakout from Normandy had shattered German cohesion. The encirclement at Falaise was not a retreat, it was a disaster of historic proportions. Entire formations ceased to exist. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were captured. Tens of thousands more were killed. The roads of northern France were littered with abandoned tanks, destroying artillery, and burned-out transport vehicles stretching for miles. This was not a fighting withdrawal, it was institutional collapse. When Field Marshal Walter Model was sent west to take command, he arrived as Hitler's designated crisis manager, a man whose career had been built on stabilizing lost causes. What he encountered horrified him. He did not inherit an army, he inherited fragments. Units existed on paper, but not in reality. Officers had no men. Soldiers had no weapons. Fuel shortages immobilized what armor remained. The defensive structures meant to protect their defenses existed only in reports, not in concrete or steel. Model later admitted that he had nothing capable of stopping a concentrated Allied thrust. A window that lasted weeks. For roughly 3 weeks in September 1944, Germany was strategically naked in the West. Allied intelligence knew it. Frontline commanders knew it. The soldiers themselves sensed it instinctively as they raced across France. German resistance was collapsing faster than Allied forces could physically advance. Patton's Third Army, in particular, was not advancing so much as surging. Units were covering distances previously thought impossible. Roads were open. Towns fell without a fight. The Germans were not contesting ground. They were abandoning it. For the first time since the Normandy landings, Allied troops could smell the end of the war. Many genuinely believed they would be home before winter. Some even expected to be home by Thanksgiving. What they did not know was that the momentum driving them forward was already being throttled by decisions made far behind the front lines, in conference rooms where maps shared space with political calculations. The Moselle and the open door. By early September, Patton's spearheads reached the Moselle River, the last significant natural barrier before the German frontier and the West Wall defenses. His tanks were roughly 100 miles from Germany proper. Beyond the Moselle lay the Rhine, and beyond the Rhine, the heart of the Reich. Patton's intelligence officers delivered the same assessment repeatedly. German forces were finished. One concentrated push, applied immediately and decisively, could collapse what remained of organized resistance in the West. Model, meanwhile, was improvising survival. He scraped together anyone who could hold a rifle: elderly reservists, teenage members of the Hitler Youth, clerks pulled from rear echelon duties who'd never fired a weapon in combat. Defensive positions were built with desperation rather than design. Each day that passed strengthened him. Each week that passed gave him something he had not possessed in August: time. The window for a decisive blow. On September 1st, 1944, Dwight Eisenhower formally assumed direct command of all Allied ground forces. With that authority came a decision that would shape the final year of the war. There were two options. The first was concentration. Select a single axis of advance, identify the strongest and fastest commander available, allocate the majority of resources to that thrust, and punch through German defenses toward decisive objectives. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. If successful, the war could end in weeks. If it failed, the Allies risked overextension and disaster. The second option was a broad front advance. Move all Allied armies forward simultaneously across the entire front, applying pressure everywhere, avoiding the risk of a single catastrophic failure, but sacrificing speed and decisiveness. From a purely military perspective, many believed concentration was the correct choice. American doctrine favored it. German defenses were incapable of stopping it. Patton demanded it. But Eisenhower was not commanding armies. He was managing an alliance. Politics over geography. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery demanded priority in the North. British leadership, particularly Churchill, pressed for a prominent role in the final defeat of Germany. Montgomery made it clear that if he did not receive support, he was willing to appeal directly to Churchill over Eisenhower's head. At the same time, Patton was politically radioactive. The slapping incidents in Sicily had made him a liability in Washington. Granting him supreme operational authority would have sparked public controversy and political backlash. There were also genuine logistical concerns. Although the Allies captured the port of Antwerp, one of the largest and most valuable ports in Europe, it remained unusable because German forces still controlled the Scheldt estuary. Until that waterway was cleared, Antwerp could not function as a supply hub. Clearing the Scheldt was Montgomery's responsibility. Instead, he focused his attention elsewhere. Eisenhower chose the broad front, not because he misunderstood the military advantages of concentration, but because he understood the political cost of it. The price of coalition unity was paid in operational caution. The supply crisis. By the first week of September, Patton's Third Army came to a halt, not because of German resistance, but because of empty fuel tanks. The Allied logistical system, designed for slower advances, could not keep pace with the speed of the breakout. The Red Ball Express strained to deliver fuel from the Normandy beaches, but distances were too great and capacity too limited. Every Allied army was short. Eisenhower was forced to prioritize. He chose Montgomery. Market Garden, the gamble. Montgomery proposed an audacious solution: Operation Market Garden, an airborne assault through the Netherlands designed to seize bridges over the Rhine and outflank German defenses entirely. He promised it would end the war by Christmas. Eisenhower approved the plan. Fuel, ammunition, transport aircraft, and air support were diverted north. Errand airborne divisions were placed under British command. Patton's army, poised for exploitation, was immobilized. Market Garden launched on September 17, 1944. It became the largest airborne operation in history. It also failed. German forces that Allied planners believed did not exist turned out to be very real. The British 1st Airborne Division was surrounded at Arnhem. Of the roughly 10,000 men that landed, fewer than 2,000 escaped. The rest were killed or captured. Allied casualties exceeded 17,000. The war did not end by Christmas. The gift of time. The true tragedy of Market Garden was not confined to the forests around Arnhem. It lay in the fuel that never reached Patton's tanks, in the momentum that was sacrificed for a shortcut that led nowhere. Patton had predicted exactly this outcome. He warned that halting his advance would allow Germany to recover. He pleaded for the fuel allocated to Market Garden. He was ignored. For Model, it was a miracle. In early September,